Where's this going? What do you want me to do?
There's sometimes a buggy. How many drivers does a buggy have?
One.
So let's just say I'm driving this buggy, and if you fix your attitude, you can ride along with me.
Okay.
I want you to go back to work tomorrow. You were recasting the lead actress anyway. Auditioned many girls for the part. When you see the girl that was shown to you earlier today, you will say, "This is the girl."
Hello, listening people.
Hello.
You're listening to Spit and Polish Presents. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Slewinski.
And I'm Bartek.
Hello, Bartek. How are you?
Good, Ryan. And you?
I'm very well. Could you give me that reply again, but in Polish? Just so that we can reinstate and reinform everyone that we are both Polish, but you speak the language and I don't.
Right. What was the line again? Good, and you, Ryan?
Yeah.
Dobrze. A ciebie?
Cool. Cool.
Oh,
See?
Cool. That's cool.
What's cool in Polish?
I guess it's kind of like good, but it can be cool. Fajny?
Just fine there?
Fajny?
It sounds just like you're saying fine, but with an accent.
Yeah, but in Polish, fine is cool. But you know what's weird, though? When I was in Poland, I think last time, my stepmom and sister took my brother and I to a pizza restaurant, and we had a pizza there, and it was nice, but it wasn't, mind-blowing or anything, so we just
It wasn't
said,
fine there, yeah.
It wasn't fine, it was just fine, and we told them, yeah, this was okay. We said it in Polish, but, obviously, we said okay, and then later on, my dad came up to us and was like, oh, man, you really didn't like that pizza, huh? And we're like, no, we said it was okay. Apparently in Poland, okay is, coded, no, I didn't like it, but I'm being nice.
Is that not what it is in English? Because it kind of sounded like, with how you told that story, that is what it is. In all honesty, I agree with your dad.
No, we thought the pizza was fine, but, we just thought, yeah, it was alright.
Yeah, I guess. It's just the tone of how you're saying it. I guess it's because the story has colored the experience as well. It's just it was fine. It was fine, which in its way is saying it wasn't, but I've got to say the words, but I get it. But that is, look, if we could keep doing this for the podcast, we would have to change everything about the pod, because we are a movie podcast, Bartek. We talk about movies.
Oh, I thought we were top 4 Polish podcast.
Well, we are that, but, with our radical views, Poland and its sexism, ooh, boo, and you being carbonated water, boo. But let's get into the minutiae of the show. Bartek, what is happening? What is the show? What are we doing?
The show that we are doing this time is Pictures Powwow, the show where we have a film that has been recommended by either one of us or a listening person, which is an individual member of the listening people, and we basically give a discussion type review of the film and our thoughts on it, and just kind of casual analysis, I guess you could say. And this week we have a recommendation from the listening people. Our friend Reese, who's been on the podcast a bunch, has recommended the 2001 David Lynch film Mulholland Drive.
Yes, not to get confused with this 1999 TV pilot Mulholland Drive, which we can talk about as well. So we are going to be talking about Mulholland Drive by David Lynch in depth. So this is going to have spoilers in it. So if you have not seen this film, or if you need a refresher on the film and don't want to have the details spoiled for you, do give it a watch. And come back and listen to us. If you are not concerned with that, or if you have seen the film and want to hear our thoughts, off we go, Bartek!
Yep, and if you're on the fence about whether to listen or not, I think this is the type of film where kind of starting off with the spoilers might make it easier to talk about, or at least mentioning it early on. So,
ooh, I may disagree with that. I think you just need to watch the film for yourself and then come back. I think.
Oh no, I mean for the purposes of our discussion in this episode.
Yeah, I guess. So, let's get into Mulholland Drive. I'll talk about my history first with this movie, and I guess briefly to touch upon David Lynch as a filmmaker as well, although we've talked about our feelings on David Lynch a bit on the pod, but we'll touch upon them again for people who haven't heard those. Mulholland Drive is one of the earlier Lynch films I have seen. I had probably seen Elephant Man before this, and I'd definitely seen Eraserhead before this. And so I had not had a full grasp on the Lynchian type storytelling that he does. Elephant Man is a bit more of a conventional story, still told in a Lynch way, but not full-on Lynch. And Eraserhead is, well, it's crazy. And so that does give me an understanding of what Lynch was like, but even Eraserhead is very different to Mulholland Drive. So I had seen Mulholland Drive not really being in the context of David Lynch fully, and I hated it. I did not like Mulholland Drive. I've only seen it the one time before this viewing, and that was that time. I absolutely despised this movie. I found it pretentious. I found it needlessly boring and slow. I didn't like any character. In fact, I did not think there was any character with actual character to them when I had first seen it. That part has changed, definitely. But I didn't find it engaging. I didn't find it particularly compelling. Nothing about it stuck with me, really. Like, when I think about Mulholland Drive over the years, all I remember is, oh, that's the Naomi Watts movie. Like, that's what I remembered more so than any of the visuals or twists and turns or dream sequences or anything else that is a bit more trademark things you remember about a David Lynch movie. This one didn't even make that much of an impact on me, other than I didn't like it. And over the years, I've talked to people and I've encountered the world of film discussion and the internet, and this is, probably one of his most acclaimed movies. It's one of his highest rated movies. It's even higher rated than Blue Velvet, which I think is his best film. And I have over the years been wanting to revisit it to see if my opinion will change, because also I have a bit of a deeper understanding of David Lynch, the person and the filmmaker, and I've heard him talk over the years about his process of making stories and movies, and he would often bring up this film as an example of how he approaches telling stories. So I was excited to revisit this. What's your history with this?
I hadn't seen it before. I'd heard of it, but didn't really know anything about it. I think it was last year I watched my first David Lynch thing, which was Blue Velvet, and I enjoyed that. And then obviously earlier this year you got me into Twin Peaks, which was initially for the purposes of the podcast, but I found myself enjoying it quite a bit. So when I heard that our friend Reese McKenzie recommended this film when we put it on the list, that was always a sort of promising thing for me, because I was really keen to check out another thing that David Lynch has done. So for this podcast, as of last night, I watched the film for the first time.
Wow. I was also interested, too, that our friend Reese McKenzie, who's a film guy, recommended this movie, because he has talked on our podcast before that he has an even lower tolerance than I do for pretentious films. He really does not like very pretentious, slow movies. He has less of a tolerance for them than I do. And so I was very keen on the fact that he likes Mulholland Drive and he likes David Lynch, and this kind of touches upon our discussion last week on the Neon Demon of why do certain filmmakers or storytellers like David Lynch get away with that kind of problem that we may have with other films and pieces of media. David Lynch seems to have cast a spell on people like myself and you and Reese of he does these things that we may not like in other movies, but we like them when he does them. And it's always interesting to figure out why that is for each individual. And we'll definitely touch upon that in our discussion. So what did you think of Mulholland Drive?
I quite enjoyed it. it was definitely a film where towards I think the last third is when the big shift happens. When it happened, I was trying to analyze what was going on, why it made the shift, what came before, what is currently happening. And even though it took until like after the film was done for me to fully piece things together, and even then, I'm not fully sure, I felt like there were moments in that last third where like something was introduced and I would have like a moment of insight and think like, oh, okay, it's all coming together before, another thing happens, and I'm like, wait, no, that's not right. So yeah, it was an interesting experience. Weird things happened. A lot of them reminded me of Twin Peaks, including a returning face.
A few.
A few, yeah. I'm pretty sure there were a few. But and yeah, even though, and I know you brought this up last week, we watched The Neon Demon. That was also a confusing film, and you asked me straight up, like, why do I like the David Lynch stuff, but I don't give this a pass? And I've been thinking about that. And definitely watching this film made me think about it a bit more, and we'll definitely get into that as we go on.
Yeah. I'm glad you had a good time with it, because I did think when I was watching it, I was thinking about our discussion last week, and again, people give that episode a listen. Bartek and I really get into some heated discussions and delve deep into some interesting topics. But just to touch upon it again, I was watching this movie and I was thinking about your comments about the Neon Demon, and I was thinking, will Bartek carry that ideology into this movie? Because there's a lot of overlap here. And unlike that movie, this movie, it's a little less clear of what was happening after you've watched it, at least for me. But yeah, so I was curious to see if you would walk into this one being like, this is the first Lynch I didn't like, Ryan, and it had a lot of things of this that I mentioned last week, but you seem to have enjoyed this.
Yes.
I have grown on this film. I've grown from absolutely hating it to not liking it. I've gone up a notch on the totem pole.
Yep.
I don't like this movie, man. I just don't know. And I hope as we discuss it, I can see more merits to it. It's not that I don't see anything of worth in this movie. I just don't connect with anything in it. There's just nothing I connect to in this movie, unlike any of his other movies that I've seen. I haven't seen all of his stuff, but even the things that I don't love necessarily, like Lost Highway, there's things in his movies that I connect to, whether it's a character or an emotion that the film wants me to feel or experience, or a striking visual that's sticking with me. And I just don't have that in this movie. I was watching it last night, really, really looking at it and really wanting to experience it and having ingratiated myself in this world, and our discussions last week about the Neon Demon, and I was thinking about my views on that, and I was trying to, think in an open-minded way like I did with that movie, with this one, and I don't hate it now. There's lots of things that kind of add up a bit more, and the tone makes more sense to me now, but I still don't connect with it, and I still find it pretentious.
Yep.
To an unbearable degree. But it is one of those films where people are like, it's a masterpiece. It's his best film, and I'm just looking at it, and I struggle with this movie very much so, to see where people are getting that from. And I guess people could say the same when we talked about Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. But to me, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, as crazy as that movie is, it still has that performance at the center of it, that really that really emotionally devastating performance that I can attach myself to But this film didn't have that for me. None of the performances really stood out to me as particularly striking. They were all good. No one was bad in the movie. I even enjoyed the sillier type of characters that you kind of see in your David Lynch affair at this point, like your silly hitman character and all of that. But I just don't connect with this film. What about this film worked for you?
I guess the central mystery was one where it was slow to get to a lot of the reveals, and when a lot of the reveals, and I guess this is an interpretation, but if you interpret the film as the first part being all a dream, a lot of the ways in which dreamlike elements were connected from the first part to the second part really kind of tickled my fancy. A lot of repetition or connecting of things between the two of them in ways that weren't necessarily maybe this isn't right, maybe not necessarily direct, but solid enough to identify. I found that an interesting thing going on. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I just I don't know, man. I like the central thing of these two women trying to figure out this woman's identity, and then it's a dream and the roles are reversed and you see like, oh, this is actually how the story played out. And that stuff works for me. But what didn't work for me in that first half is just like, I want to be invested in their little romance and exploration and detective case. But then we just detour off into all of these other things that just feel really random. And of course, they're not fully random. There's a reasoning for it. There's a dream state logic of, oh, she's taken this thing from her real life world and she's recontextualizing it in her dream to help justify her horrible actions that she's done in the real world and all of that. I get that, but the pacing of the movie's too long for a start. For me, it's nearly 2.5 hours long, and it feels it. But
I think it is 2.5 hours long.
It's like 2 hours and 26 minutes. But
okay.
As much as I was getting into their scenes, and then it would go, and now we're going to meet a cowboy. And then we're going to spend time with this cowboy guy. And we know he's going to be important, but I just wanted to spend more time in their story instead of detouring off to this guy's talking about a dream he had. And then he faints, and then we don't see that guy for another hour. Like, it did feel a little bit too much like vignettes, too much like short films, too much like David Lynch wrote these down in his dream journal, and he wanted to put them in his movie.
And you were ultimately led to think that they were going to connect to the main story in some way, but they ended up being either like red herrings or loose ends.
I didn't even think that. I guess I did think that, but there does, like you said last week, there comes a point where you just surrender yourself and go, I don't know, but I'm sure David Lynch does.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't care about those things. That's the main thing. I didn't connect to any of those vignettes. I didn't connect to the director guy's story. I didn't care about him or his woes or his problems or what that story was commenting upon the Hollywood industry or her story. I didn't care about the cowboy story guy. I didn't care about the guy who's a dumbass assassin who shoots a fat lady. Like, yeah, it's funny, but I didn't connect with it. I didn't register with it. What I did was their story. And I know that stuff connects to their story. It does. And who she is in the real world, Naomi Watts. But I was invested in their stuff, and every time we left them and their apartment, my brain just wasn't in tune with what the movie was trying to give me, because I just didn't care about these stories. It's not like Twin Peaks, where Twin Peaks, the show, not the Fire Walk With Me movie, even the Fire Walk With Me movie is far more focused in on the character who's the central thrust of the movie. But the show, that has many different stories. I connect more with their stories a lot because, one, they're all real people in that world, but also there's a heavy emotional thrust to each one of their stories. While in this, I didn't feel any big emotional thrust that I was supposed to get or glean, or I did or didn't, from the director's story or from the cowboy or any of those disparate elements that were there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I just can't get past that stuff. And the twist and the reveals and the hard right turn at the end of the movie, it works for me. It works for me because from that point on, we're really focusing in on the main character of the movie.
Yep.
And what she really is and what's really going on with her. I understood that on this rewatching. I think the first time round, I was just so done with how pretentious the movie was at that point that I didn't care. But I liked them too. I liked whatever variants of names you want to call them. But,
Betty and Ruth, or Diane and
Rita. It was Rita, not Ruth.
Ruth. Sorry, yeah, Ruth was the aunt.
Yeah. Yeah. And I liked them. I liked both versions of them, the real version and the dream version of them. I liked those performances. I felt for those characters. And that's my issue is I liked them. I felt for them. I really wanted to be with them the whole movie, but we gotta go see the scene in which the director guy hits a limousine with a golf club because that's something Jack Nicholson did. It's a reference to a Hollywood thing because David Lynch wants to reference things. I noticed that reference to Sunset Boulevard. That was subtle. And then, there's another one, and there's another one, and there's another one. David, I've seen Sunset Boulevard. I get it. You like the movie? So did I. And that's what I was getting frustrated with on this watching is I was noticing these things and I was going, yep, I know David, but I just want to go back to our two lead characters who I actually have an investment in. I'm just being so mean to this movie, but I don't mean to be. Like, I want to like this. I want to see the appeal of it that you see and other people see, but there's just too much fat for me. What I see is fat.
Yeah. Definitely, I think there were some scenes that dragged on a bit, like the club Silencio scene.
Mm.
It was a long scene. It was very highly metaphorical and surreal. And it was definitely something that, like, I'd think about more after being done with the film, whereas a lot of other things I was trying to connect them as the film was going on. Like a lot of the elements we were talking about before, which you describe as fat, which in a way ultimately do kind of end up being like that because, the film is described as a mystery film, and you think that there is an entire conspiracy going on because one of the elements is there is a literal conspiracy. A mafia group is forcing a director to hire one specific woman in a role despite the fact that he doesn't want to. And you think that that's somehow going to relate to the central story. And that is a kind of false promise that pulls you along throughout the whole movie.
And it technically does connect to the central story, though. That's the thing, like, they all do connect in a way, but it isn't as crystallized and clear like more conventional movies or like previous Lynch movies that or previous Lynch material we've discussed on the show. As surreal as those things are, like the Twin Peaks universe is very surreal. There's lots of loose ends, there's lots of ifs and or buts, but there's lots more things in that world that are pretty set in stone of this is what this is kind of thing. But that's my opinion on that. I also have a bigger attachment to that world than this one. So what did you think the movie... I know this is the tough question. It's a David Lynch movie, but I've got to ask...
Yep.
What do you think it's about? What do you think it all adds up to? What do you think is being said? What is the movie? What is Mulholland Drive to you?
So I see it as Our central character, from my interpretation, is the Diane character, played by Naomi Watts, who throughout most of the movie is represented as this Betty character. In her world, she was an aspiring actress who didn't have the talent, and she didn't have the fortune of being selected for a role. She had a love interest named Camilla, played by our other lead, who she was in a relationship with. It was broken off, and Camilla ended up having two different lovers that weren't her, so she had this dual issue of being jealous of her and also, being kind of scorned that her love was ultimately thrown aside. And in her reaction to all that was to, hire a hitman to kill Camilla. And at some point, a David Lynchian surreal stuff happens, which puts her into this dream world in which she is living out the idealized life that she would have wanted. So, the woman she loves is with her. She is having she's going to have a promising Hollywood career. She completely nails an audition to unambiguous praise. And when she doesn't get the role, she realizes that it's because there was a conspiracy, like the director was forced to choose someone else. So it kind of sees her as not being at fault for a lot of things that happened.
Yeah, that's a very succinct kind of way of looking at it. I'm very similar. There's a few details that I kind of picked up upon this watching of it that I didn't on the first all those years ago. Yeah, I got it as Naomi Watts as Diane. Diane's a great name that David Lynch loves to use a lot.
And a dual identity thing with a character named Diane.
Yeah, and dual identities and blonde women. And he likes those. And he likes Naomi Watts. And he, but I got it. Yeah, I got a very similar vibe of Naomi Watts' character is a fuck up in the real world. Diane, she's a loser. She's a drug addict. She's a failure. She tried to live the Hollywood dream, and it chewed her up and spat her out. She was a promising star because she won a jitterbug competition, and she thought that could propel her to higher acclaim, but it did not. She did not succeed in the audition for that movie, and Camilla got that role in the movie that she wanted. And whatever along the way, they form a relationship, but the relationship is fundamentally broken at its core because, to me, she hates Camilla and loves her at the same time. She hates the Camilla who is the vapid movie star actress that everyone loves, but she likes this sensitive Camilla that I think is the representation that Rita plays in the dream. That's the Camilla that she likes. The sweet-natured, good person. She doesn't like the vapid Hollywood star that Camilla can put on.
Yeah, and the person who was in the dream was also someone that needed protecting, and because she sees herself as good, she will protect her and try to solve her problem.
Yeah, and in the real world, yeah, like you said, her and Camilla have falling out. Camilla's gonna marry or get with the director guy, and obviously she has a boner against that director guy. She doesn't like him, obviously, for that. And she hires a hitman, like you say, and she regrets it, ultimately. I think her dream state is her trying to process the guilt and the regret of killing the love of her life, and it's her brain trying to cope with it and justify it and reconcile the fact and ignore it and rationalize it and recontextualize it with all these things from the real world that she's putting in her dream state to make her story better. Like you said, the director didn't choose her because there's a conspiracy. In the dream, though, the conspiracy, the actress that does get the role that actress's name is Camilla Rhodes. It's the Camilla that she doesn't like, but this one is played by a different actress. It's like a blonde-haired lady who we do see in the real world, whispering to the real Camilla near the end of the movie at the dinner party sequence. So it's like all these things from her real world situation are bleeding into her dreams, trying to point her to the reality of situation of what's actually happening as well. There's many ominous lines of dialogue of flagging up what's actually going on. She has like a line that's like, oh, it's funny calling yourself, which is kind of ironic. And when they break into the Diane in the dream state, there's like the dead body on the bed, which is some foreshadowing. And there's lots of things from her real world that are bleeding into her dream, and she's recontextualizing. And that stuff is, and that's what the movie is. You know, that's what it is to me. And that is all great, and when I say it and talk about it like that, it sounds so awesome. Like, I'm like, that sounds great, you know, I love that. And there's so many more details that are really impressive if I keep going along that line of discussion. Like, keep going along that line, like in her audition scene, the big audition scene that she nails the role and all of that in the dream, like that's in a dream. The director of that movie still doesn't appreciate her performance. He's still like, it feels false and phony. And I get several meanings from that. Like, I bet you those were probably the feedback that the real director gave her in her real audition, probably. Because those are the things you hang on to. Especially when you're an actor. You hang on to the negative feedback more so than the positive. And or I also take from that scene when the director's still like giving a bad feedback, he's being judged by everyone else, and he's seen as completely naive and clueless, as if he's a type of guy that can't see a great actor standing in front of them, like he's completely blind and naive. So I also get that. There's just those little details like that I really love about the movie. Like, there is things I do love about this movie. The audition scene being probably the best scene in the movie for me. And all of that is what I get from the movie. And when I talk about it, I'm winning myself over about the movie. But then I just remember, like, long sequences with Billy Ray Cyrus in them. Yeah? And the director pouring paint on jewelry. And here's a reference to Sunset Boulevard for a whole scene. And here's another one for Gilda. And that's when the movie loses me. And a lot of its dialogue loses me too. Like, I don't find it as charming as I do in other David Lynch movies because, I don't know, there's just, like I keep saying, there's a disconnect there. In other movies of his, I've bought into the world a bit more. So the weird dialogue of the world of Twin Peaks, or the world of Blue Velvet, or the world of Elephant Man, or the world of Eraserhead, I feel like I understand or am more ingratiated in that sphere, and he's put me under the spell that his dialogue makes sense in that world. But in this, it did feel like, oh, it's just David Lynch dialogue. Oh, here's a guy who's going to talk about a dream he had. And it's going to be a really long sequence in which they talk about this dream, and it just goes on and on and on. And that guy was in Idiocracy, Bartek. Did you recognize him?
He looked familiar, but I couldn't pinpoint where I saw him.
He's the guy that's in every movie ever made, ever, and every TV show. I mentioned him in Idiocracy. He's the guy who at the beginning of the movie is the intellectual husband who dies trying to jerk off to inseminate his wife. And he's in everything. He's in everything. And here he's in this movie, and he's great. I thought that scene played brilliantly. David Lynch definitely nails the brooding tension of the scene, but I just didn't care though. I don't know, like there's the technical aspects and the performances and even some of the lines of dialogue in that scene were really great, but I just didn't get into it, man. I just don't know why. Like I don't know why for that scene in particular. I think it's just like I was just like, oh, David, we get it. You like dreams. That's the whole movie, is dreams. However, doppelgangers and dreams, and this person's playing this person, and there's a double cross, and I think it's just the David Lynch isms in this movie grate my nerves. Then
they're a bit too obvious for you, I guess, this time? or
even the first time. I don't know. Yeah,
or
I guess.
Shallow. I don't know.
I guess. What were some standout moments to you in the movie?
So we had that scene where we first met the director, and he was in that meeting room where they met the two mafia guys. And I think that was the first time we had the scene earlier where they had the phone calls, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of trying to introduce the conspiracy angle of the film. I thought that obviously we were talking about before that we were being strung along to think that there was actually a conspiracy in this world when in fact it was all a metaphor. I felt like the bizarre nature of that scene, because most of the first half of the film is, fairly normal, kind of reminded me a bit more of the villain from, what's it called, Blue Velvet, how he kind of had a bit of a craziness to him that wasn't quite explained. So I was kind of hooked in to those mafia guys who, like, he had the cappuccino and he spits it out, and it did feel kind of, I guess, familiar in terms of David Lynch stuff that I've seen before, but I thought that, like, that was going to be played up a bit more, so it was something that kind of stuck in my head throughout the film.
And they do come back time and time again, those guys. I mean, they didn't remind me of Frank from Blue Velvet. They reminded me of the Mafia brothers from the Twin Peaks The Return.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're very ominous, but then they completely deflate that tension by giving them a silly thing to do.
Yeah.
And then they become jokes by the end of the Twin Peaks The Return. But in this, these guys didn't become jokes. One of those guys, pretty much the main one of the two gangster brother guys or whatever, the one who reacted to the cappuccino, I'm pretty sure, or the espresso, is the film composer of David Lynch, Angelo Badalamenti.
Yeah, I read that.
That's him. He was great. I didn't know he did. I didn't know that until the credits came along, and I was like, oh, he was in the movie as an actor, because he has a really recognizable name. I mean, you see that name written down, you're not going to forget it anytime soon.
It's a name with an identity to it, yeah.
And his music is so good. That's the thing I loved about this movie. The music was great. I mean, his music's great in all the David Lynch projects he's on. The music is a standout character of the movie. It is really memorable, recognizable. It is a real hallmark of this era of David Lynch, and the music, it's just so good.
Yeah, I remember even in Twin Peaks The Return, that was one of the big compliments you had for it.
I mean, I prefer the Pink Room sequence with the music in Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me with the guitar, and you can barely hear the lines of dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that scene too, with the guys, and they got the briefcases there, and there's just like the golf club sitting on the desk in front of the director. You're like, what's that about? And then you find out what that's about later. And he uses it. And just like what a pissant the director is, just like, no, I'm not cursing that girl. I want my girl. And they're back and forth, like, they're very much playing it like different scenes. They're playing it in a completely different register to him. And his agent, who was also great. Yeah, I also really liked, visually, I liked how David Lynch presented, to jump to the end, her suicide when she shot herself in the mouth. In the head. Mm-hmm. I really liked how that was presented. It was very, very well done. The smoke filling the room, and it was very intense. Like, I wish I was engaged emotionally like I was in that sequence, like for other parts of the movie. I found that visually striking. I thought it was an interesting way to visually show that, instead of just she shoots herself in the mouth and then falls down on bed. That extra theatricality to the whole affair was wonderful. I even like the, not just because it was funny, but also the nightmarish quality of the old people that crawl underneath her door and
Yeah.
eventually they become big and chase her around her house, and then she goes in the bedroom and kills herself. I like that. I genuinely like that. I found the old people characters to be both funny, because David Lynch obviously has a thing about how funny old people are, but he also has a thing about how creepy old people can be, and I found they worked really well for the little amounts we got of them, of doing that. Like, I like the scene of them in the back of the limo just grimacing and smiling falsely, and just her patting his knee over and over again.
Yeah, you're taking some words out of my mouth, because earlier when I mentioned that I like had a moment of insight towards the end, it was when they popped up, and they were, they throughout the entire film. That's a bit misleading. They're in a scene early on and a scene right at the end. They are all smiles and kind of giggly. So when I did see them again, it kind of hit this thing for me. I was like, oh, okay, so there was some sort of supernatural thing that was around from the beginning. I think at that point I was kind of struggling between, like, was the first half a dream, or was it an alternate universe that, like, the characters had fallen into, and they kind of had, like, I don't know, amnesia and thought that other characters were other things.
Yeah.
So that's what I was thinking in the moment. But then when she shot herself, that kind of brought it back for me, because I remembered, oh yeah, they found the dead body.
You also got to remember the old people are in the opening credits of her doing her jitterbug dance.
Oh, were they?
Yeah, if you watch that sequence again, they're standing right next to her on either side of her, cheering and celebrating her, whether they were judges or even her parents, who knows, or grandparents. And so they're set up from the very beginning of the movie. They're right there, front and center, and there they are at the end.
Okay, yeah. I remembered that the film opened with that dancing scene, but I didn't really remember much from it or pass it too much in terms of its connection to the rest of the movie. So it's interesting that they were there.
Well, yeah, and they do bring up the jitterbugs thing throughout the movie, though. So, yeah, I guess it just didn't stick with you like other David Lynch dance sequences in movies, huh? There's no Leland dancing in Twin Peaks.
It's the hand dancing who in this film stands still or sits still.
Yeah, you want to explain that? Who you're referring to, just for those who are not familiar?
Yeah, the character had a name. I can't quite remember. I think it was like Mr. Began with R. He seemed to be the one in charge of the mafia conspiracy. What they do is they have the short actor that played the hand from Twin Peaks in this...
The arm.
The arm. Oh, the arm. That's right, the arm. Oh, yeah, because the character was missing an arm. They have him standing in this prosthetic, average-sized body suit, but like his head is still kind of small, so it looks really surreal. He's in the middle of this dark room with a guy standing at the back, and he only talks to people on the phone or through this glass wall at the other end of the room to talk about mysterious parts of the conspiracy, about how, you have to get him to cast this girl. He can do anything he wants, but he has to at least do that.
Yeah, I really like the scene with him where the guy is asking him, like, do you want me to shut it down? Do you want me to shut it all down? And he's like, yeah, shut it all down. When the director's still refusing to cast the woman. I like that scene with him. But, and again, like I said, I've described what my understanding of the movie is. I know he's important to this, adding to the she thinks there's a conspiracy. But at the same time, why did we need him there?
Yeah, it does feel like a very, again, like I said before, transparent kind of, oh, here's a weird thing to do.
Yeah, I wish, and I wouldn't say David Lynch is a subtle storyteller by any means. There are some very overt things, but there were several moments in the movie that I'm like, oh, come on, David, I know you like to be confusing and all, but there's also like some subtlety. Like, you didn't like the Club Silencio scene. I didn't like it either, but I didn't like it in terms of how, and I remember feeling this the first time, but I don't know if you felt this, of how obviously it was telling us that this is all fake. Just the whole scene is just, this is an illusion. This is an illusion.
Yeah.
this is
It
an
starts
illusion. This is all fake. Nothing's real. It's an illusion. And I'm like, okay, I get it, David.
Yeah. It starts off like that, but then it lasts a long time afterwards.
Yeah, but for me, it just keeps going. And it almost works for me because there's this bit where this woman starts singing this Roy Orbison song in Spanish, and then she faints. And even though that scene told us over and over and over again that this is all taped and this isn't real, a part of me was still surprised, as were they, that she fell over and the music's still playing. Because
Yep, same.
for some reason, I guess, the magic of David Lynch is you forgot the information that was directly told to you, that this is an illusion, this is taped, it's not real. I mean, I did for that moment, and that moment then reminded me, oh yeah, they mentioned that. And then the rest of the movie happened, and then it was like, it's all an illusion. I'm like, I know, you told me an hour ago, David. I wish he was in the movie. I wish David Lynch was in the movie for a start. That would have made my appreciation better, because I love him as an actor. He's such a crazy, weird man.
Yeah, he looks good too.
All right. he looks good too. He has big hair.
He should have been the pool cleaner.
Billy Ray. How did you feel? Billy Ray Cyrus just turns up in the movie for no apparent reason. It was very weird.
Man, I don't really know him that well or anything.
You telling me you never listened to Achy Breaky Heart?
I've heard the song, I guess.
You've never seen Hannah Montana?
No.
What? Are you real right now, Bartek?
No, I'm a dream.
Here you are, walking around being a cultural pleb. You haven't seen Alien, and you haven't seen Hannah Montana. Wow, Bartek, you need to get cultured, I think. We need to do the Hannah Montana movie next week. I think that's your recommendation.
Well, you can recommend on next week.
No, you're recommending it. Forget whatever you had lined up in your brain and you were excited to be like, this is what we're doing, and surprise me, and then we watch it. No. We're doing Hannah Montana now. Far out,
What's the
Bartek.
name? What's the name of a Hannah Montana movie?
Hannah Montana the movie.
Okay, what year's it from?
You got me there. Let's guess
Come
2010.
on, culture man. 2010?
I'm guessing that, yeah.
Okay.
I'm guessing. Will I be
I'll write
right?
that
Will I be
down.
wrong? We'll find out next week when we cover Hannah Montana the movie.
Hey, Ryan, you got nothing to worry about because I'm going to be the one recommending it and telling you what year it's from. So if it's wrong, I'm wrong.
Excellent. But we got on Hannah Montana. Billy Ray Cyrus turned up. He was an interesting casting choice. He wasn't bad, but he was... That whole sequence where Billy Ray Cyrus is in it as the pool cleaner, fucking the Hollywood director's wife. Did it remind you of another scene we've covered on the show, by any chance?
Now that you're asking, I feel like there's an obvious answer, but I'm...
Really? No, popped in there. It was the best scene of the movie too, that we covered on the
God.
pod.
What was the name of the movie?
Intolerable Cruelty.
Of course, the beginning of the film.
Jeffrey Rush coming home, singing "I'm Just a Poor Boy" while he drives his rich-ass Porsche down the most famous Hollywood street, and he goes to his mansion, and Ollie will fix it. And it reminded me of that. I think this movie came out before Intolerable Cruelty as well. So
yeah, that was 2004.
So
right?
Intolerable Cruelty has a lot to answer for. I think it has to give a tribute David Lynch, I guess, for the guy comes home to see his wife fucking the pool boy, and then he fucks up her shit.
Yes.
This guy just dunked it in pink paint, and I was just saying, you can wash that, dear. You know? Like, she was freaking out. I was like, oh no, my jewelry is ruined. I'm like, it's just paint. You can wash that.
Yeah, and some would say that pink jewelry is better.
You would say that.
I know a guy named Stark Reality. I think he'd appreciate it.
Yeah. There are lots of things I really do love about this movie, but I just can't get past how pretentious it feels to me. There was so many moments in which I rolled my eyes and just went, oh, come on, David. really. And I'll be fully honest. I have a hard time connecting to dream states and movies and dream logic and stuff. I don't remember my dreams in real life, and I think that adds to my disconnect when it comes to these type of affairs. It's not just David Lynch, although I found myself connecting with David Lynch dream stuff in other projects, but again, those other projects ingratiated me into their world a lot more. Well, this one, it didn't do it as successfully for me, so when it's all dreamy stuff, I roll my eyes. I do have disconnects with dreamy type movies of this is a dream and all that, and I'm not afraid to admit that is probably a major contributing factor is I just don't remember my dreams, so I don't fully appreciate or understand the what's being captured on screen as a representation of dreams and dream logic. That's me, though. That's not the film's fault, but it does hamper my enjoyment of the film or my appreciation of it, because I just look at these sequences and I just go, oh, David, you could have just left that in your dream journal, you know?
Yeah, now you mention it, I guess I, in recent years, kind of have been a bit more into the whole dream stuff. Like, I even remember after we did, this is jumping back, I think, like, 2 years when we did the Stardust episode on the Mystery Box, and I told you that not long after I listened to that episode, I had a dream where I went to a Woolworths to buy some chocolate, and the name of the chocolate was something like Gus Fring, and when I bit it, it had like the kind of fleshy colors that we saw in some parts of that movie, and I just immediately connected like, oh, Gus Fring, disgusting, and it was this weird thing where I just realized, oh, I'm in a dream.
Yeah.
And even just last night, I had a thing where yesterday my brother told me that he's lately been playing the Pokemon game that came out last year in November, and he told me that it has multiple save files, so that if I'm interested in playing it, I can, because that's a thing that hasn't happened in the franchise before. And even though I wasn't interested, last night I actually dreamed I was playing it, and it was this weird, like, glitchy affair where nothing made sense, and it's just really weird that a little thing that happened briefly yesterday that I didn't really think much of, affected my dreams in such a really weird way.
And see, what you just did, David Lynch transcribed and transmutated into his film. That whole experience you just felt of like, how weird, isn't it? And that's what he put in his film. And as you were discussing your dreams and all that, my brain started to shut off because I can't relate to you. Because I don't have that, and it's like,
and that's a known thing. You've mentioned that to me many times over the years, and I've remembered that. Yeah,
and it's not your fault. It's not this film's fault. It is just this is something I cannot empathize with or relate to. It's just, and so I have many friends who have surreal dreams, and they tell me about their dreams, and I'm like, oh wow, cool. Like I just don't care. It just doesn't work for me because I don't have that experience in my everyday life. When I wake up in the morning, I'm just like, all right. I was just like, nothing happened. I know I do have dreams, but I just don't remember them. I haven't remembered my dreams in probably like 15 years. So
you don't always remember a dream, but sometimes I just do. It's weird.
I just don't for whatever reason, and they don't stick with me 2 years later. Like,
well, that one I specifically told someone about, so it's easier to remember.
But it stuck with you,
like,
and David Lynch writes his down and puts them into movies, so they stick with him, and then they stick with us, because now we have seen them represented and transformed and innovated into his movies, and I think that's awesome. Like, I'm jealous of that type of storytelling. Like, I really like David Lynch's several approaches to telling stories. He has many different philosophies and ideologies and standpoints, and we've talked about this before on the pod, but just to touch on it again, we both like David Lynch. We think he's an interesting person. We take him sincerely. Some people think of him as a troll or trying to just be avant-garde for avant-garde's sake. You have to surrender yourself to him, like you've stated in some ways. I don't fully agree with some of the ways you stated it, but I agree that there is a level of, like, you just have to surrender yourself to the fact that this isn't going to make logical sense, but it's going to make emotional sense more often than not. It's going to emotionally guide you rather than narratively. His stories.
I can definitely say that when I was watching this movie and there were some confusing moments, a part of me was thinking like, okay, here's David Lynch doing his David Lynch thing, but another part of me was saying, okay, but let's try to actually think about it and see if we can make any sense of it. So I guess I was trying to avoid purposely thinking like, oh, this is pretentious, because I wanted to try to find out what was going on.
Yeah, and I like his several different approaches. The way he talks about fishing is a major kind of thing that he talks about with storytelling. You got to fish for ideas. Just sit there and just think and just keep thinking and write them down. All this, and he has this whole philosophy about the eye of the duck. Every movie has the eye of the duck scene, in which it's the scene that is representative of the movie. It is the scene that is the pinnacle of what the movie's about. Like
what was the donut thing? Like whole of the donut?
Yeah, the whole of the donut. Like you don't want to get your story. He has crazy notion. The way he describes them is all crazy, but once you kind of understand what he's communicating, it's all kind of fun. He has the whole donut where you want to focus your story in on the hole in the donut, not the donut itself, which is, the fat, the fluff, the kind of excess that you could fall into when you tell your story. You want to pursue the story rather than get consumed by it, which I feel I didn't get as much with this one. I feel like he took his eye off that hole a little, but that's me, like I've said. And I like also he's done this with Mulholland Drive, but like he'll just collect newspaper clippings and write down dreams and collect stories and like put them, in some shoe boxes or whatever else, and then he'll grab them all out and spread them out and try and, and he'll put some together that form a little scene or a story, and then before you know it, he's kind of structured out an idea of a movie or a show or a project he wants to pursue. And I think that is so awesome. I love that idea, and I've implemented it in my creative pursuits in minor ways here and there, and I like that, and I think it's a valiant way to do it, and it's his way of doing it for some of his things, and I think it does work in this regard. But I don't begrudge anyone who likes this movie. I just can't get past the pretentious energy of it. But that's okay. I think every David Lynch fan or people who enjoy his movies have that one film of his that they just go, no, that one is pretentious, and they can't get past it. I'm just generalizing, but in my experiences, I think everyone has that one film of his. Usually it's Inland Empire, but which I've only seen a portion of, so I can't speak to its full acclaim, but I enjoyed what I saw of it. But this one's the one for me. I just find it a little bit too much up its own bum.
Yeah, well, I can't blame you for that. It is what it is, I guess.
Yeah. Was it fun for you noticing the little David Lynch actors popping up in the movie? Like, oh, there's that one, and there's that one that we've experienced on the show.
The main ones that I noticed were, the arm, and obviously, and this came later, but obviously Dougie's wife.
Yeah, Naomi Watts, yeah.
Naomi Watts.
She wears practically the same outfit for the first half of the movie. David Lynch likes putting her in slightly ill-fitting clothes in this and in Twin Peaks: The Return, like the button-up jumper that she has that's slightly too small on her. He likes her in that kind of outfit. Don't know what that's about.
Was there anyone else in this film that was in other things?
Wow. You didn't notice the cop at the beginning of the movie who never came back again? The two detectives?
Yeah, that was a character.
He was the Truman in The Return, the one that replaced Harry, his brother.
You're right, he was.
And he's a big actor who only died recently, Robert Forster, who was in Jackie Brown and Breaking Bad and just in a ton of things. And he usually played that type of role, like the kind of stern cop role, usually. Yeah, he only passed away. And yeah, there was a couple others here and there spread, but yeah, we basically hit the big hitters. The guy who had the dream, the one who was in Idiocracy, he was in Twin Peaks: The Return as well. He was guy who sat next to Laptop for most of the show and then just got shot.
Oh, was he in like an office
Yeah.
built room or something? Yeah, there was someone like that.
Yeah, and there's a few of those kind of. This one features more of like the smaller parts rather than the bigger ones in his other movies. Obviously, the arm being probably the most recognizable out of his roster, because he's just such a weird looking guy, and he always plays weirdo roles in his movies. Anything else you want to talk about with this? This is it's got a lot going on. There's obviously stuff we haven't touched upon. Anything you want to touch upon?
Nothing spring to mind. I think we got it. Is there anything you got?
No. I guess the final thing I want to talk about is to revisit the discussion from last week of why does this work for you and the Neon Demon doesn't?
Mm-hmm.
Because you even stated at the end of the Neon Demon that there wasn't, you didn't feel like there was things in that movie that only made sense to the director. Everything was communicated effectively enough for you, the audience, to grab all the pieces and figure it out for yourself. But you even said in this episode there are certain sections of this movie or certain parts that it's just, oh, David Lynch knows what that means. And isn't that kind of a negative thing? Or is it a positive? So, to return to that, how come this one works better for you?
I guess maybe it might have something to do with the fact that this film kind of feels like it doesn't have concrete answers or explanations, and maybe I just enjoyed trying to piece it together in a way that kind of made sense, or it could be interpreted. Maybe with the Neon Demon, because I was struggling to find, a concrete answer which I was positive existed, maybe that hampered my experience. Maybe that has something to do with it.
But yeah, again, it kind of does sound like, you had similar issues, though, with the both. Like, this one, you were struggling to figure out what the answers were, but that was fun for you. And in the other one, you were struggling to find out the answers, and it wasn't fun for you.
Yeah, maybe I was just more into the pace of this film. Maybe it's just that I was more successful this time in trying to piece things together.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Because again,
I'm trying not to come across like hypocritical or anything. I'm trying to think genuinely what the deal is, because
I purposely did not bring up last week that Neon Demon has similarities with Mulholland Drive, because I knew we were going to talk about Mulholland Drive, and I didn't want that to fully color the experience of watching this and being like.
When you asked me about David Lynch, and then you said that we were doing a David Lynch film next week, I put the pieces together.
Well, yeah, that was fair, but that it would feel weird not to bring that up in the discussion. But I purposely didn't say Mulholland Drive specifically, because we were going to talk about that one, and they do have that overlap. The LA scene that consumes women and spits them out and hollows them out, and they have their different approaches. They are different movies, but there is overlaps in your problems with one and praise of the other. And it's always interesting of why things can be a problem in one movie and not in another, because that is the experience of art. There's the thing of trying to discuss and define why certain things work for you in one thing and don't work for you in another. And it's the opposite way around for me with this movie. I found the things that I liked about the Neon Demons side of things didn't work for me in this movie. I also kind of wish that this movie, like the Neon Demon and like other Lynch movies, was funnier. I don't know. It was funny in parts, but I don't know. I think David Lynch's sense of humor wasn't as strongly present in this movie like it is in most of his movies, including Fire Walk With Me, which is like a depressing nightmare. I don't know if you feel likewise, because you're a big fan of the humor of David Lynch specifically as well.
Let's see. Yeah, those.
The big comedic set piece being the botched assassination sequence where the guy shoots the guy and then accidentally shoots the gun and goes through the wall and hits a woman, and then it goes on and on and on.
Yeah, the immediate tone shift between these two guys getting along, and then oh no, this was an assassination, and then it goes wrong. Yeah, it's. I guess I didn't really think about it too much, but yeah, I guess since the whole first half is kind of trying to build up this idealized, upbeat world, the humor felt maybe a little bit more natural. I'm not too confident in that statement, but
The biggest laugh
yeah,
I had in the movie wasn't the assassination scene, which is very David Lynchy type of humor. He also, he likes that kind of humor. But I found what made me laugh more was Naomi Watts' performance for the first half of the movie, because it is so overwroughtly like innocent and bushy tailed and bright eyed, and it made me laugh several times.
it was very. Yeah, it was kind of leaning to Mary Sue-isms, kind of, which that's kind of the interpretation of, this ideal world.
She was playing the virgin, pure old Hollywood type of girl that you would see in those movies, who was like, golly gee, I'm just so happy. I'm going to make it big, and it's going to be great. And
You're going to see me on the silver screen.
Yeah, and has no understanding of danger in her world.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, is the idealized version that Diane wants of herself. To be innocent again. To be naive again. Or at all.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's all I have to really say about it. It still doesn't work for me, but I'm glad it worked for you, and it clearly works for a lot of people. This is held in his high esteem. Where would you place this in your rankings of your David Lynch experience?
That's an interesting question, yeah. I've generally liked all the things that he's done. I think maybe Blue Velvet still tops it a bit.
Yeah.
Do we count the entirety of Twin Peaks as one thing, or individual seasons and the movie?
I don't know. I go Blue Velvet's my number one. Blue Velvet is great. Yep. I like then Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. I think, boy, that film just gets under my skin. And then Eraserhead, and then Elephant Man, and it goes on from there. And this movie's my lowest on the list of the ones I've seen of his. Oh, maybe Dune. Dune's below this one. Because that's David Lynch struggling from the studio. At least this is him full force.
Yeah, I will say, similar to the Neon Demon, I am keen to rewatch all the David Lynch films as well. Just, again, as we were talking about in the Neon Demon, these kind of surreal films do have some rewatchability merit to them. You remember things, and then you can analyze it a bit easier than just thinking back.
It's so funny to me too, because last week one of your main complaints about the Neon Demon was how slow it was and that it was so long, and yet it wasn't even 2 hours. And this is nearly 2.5 hours, practically 2.5 hours, and that wasn't even something really brought up in this for you as an issue.
Yeah.
It's just, it is. That's the interesting thing about movies, what works for some don't work for others. For me, like I said, the pacing of Neon Demon flew by the second time around. This time around with this one, this movie felt its length to me. It didn't feel less or more. It felt, that felt it. But that is...
This entire cycle has been interesting. Like, all three films that we've had recommended are, entertainment industry focused. All three we've brought up the pacing of them, like one feels quick, the other isn't. It almost makes me think like, oh, there's a conspiracy going on with our choices.
Yeah, and so the Hannah Montana movie you're going to recommend also deals with the entertainment industry, of course. So
yes, next week we are doing the Hannah Montana movie, or Hannah Montana the movie from 2010. I was originally going to pick the 1982 film First Blood, but, this is what happens.
Well, I'll ask you again. Do you want to do First Blood?
Next week, we are doing the 1982 film First Blood.
I didn't say that you could say that we're doing that. I asked if you wanted to.
Yeah, but then I remembered I'm a host.
Oh, that's fair. So that is Rambo movie, right?
Yep, the first Rambo film.
Oh, it is? I kind of lose track with how they're chronologically they order these days. Because is it First Blood and then First Blood Part 2?
Yeah, it's First Blood, then Rambo, First Blood Part 2, then Rambo 3.
And then it just keeps going on. Rambo 4, Rambo 5.
I've only seen the first two.
Oh, wow, you're a fool. You need to watch all of them. All right, so we're doing First Blood. Rambo himself. Make sure to watch that in the interim. It will be an interesting experience. I can't remember if I have or haven't seen this. I've seen one of them at some point. We'll see. I remember what one I did see had very obvious dubbing. So we'll see if it's this one. We'll see.
We will.
So make sure to check that out. You can follow us on the social medias of Facebook and Twitter, Spit and Polish Presents, and make sure to rate and review us on whatever podcatcher allows it. Hit us up at our email at spitandpolished@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts, opinions, and questions and all that you feel like you want to hit our way, whether it relates to this movie or ones we've talked about on the pod before. And you can recommend movies for us to cover on the show down the line, like our friend Reese McKenzie did with this film. Yep, that's all the information out there, Bartek. I feel like leaving us on the last dream I do remember having. Are you okay with me finishing up the episode with that?
Yeah, let's hear it.
So I remember vividly in high school, about 15 years ago. No, not high school, but yeah, like about...
I was about to say.
Not 15, I'm not that old. About 15, maybe 14 years ago, I remember vividly I had a dream that was me waiting in line at the school canteen to get nuggets, chicken nuggets with chicken salt. And then I woke up.
Okay.
That's my dream.
Was there
it was a memory.
Was there
It wasn't a dream.
Yeah.
It was a memory. It was just my memory played out for verbatim. There was no any alterations. It was just a memory. And that has always been my dreams. It's just the memory plays out with no additions that are notable if there are any. It is just a memory happened.
Was it a memory, or was it a reconstruction from something that happened that previous day, which made you remember and construct this brand new scene of something that you have done in the past, but it wasn't exact?
In the real world, I did get the nuggets, but in the dream world, I didn't get them because I woke up before I got them.